Good morning, everybody. My name is Samantha Mirabal with Melco's application team, and we are here for our DesignShop Talk, which is question and answers. So please let me know what questions you might have. You can type them in on the comments on the little chats for these two lives. We're live on both Facebook and YouTube, I believe. Yep, we're both up on both of them. So please let me know what questions you have, and we'll try to get them answered during the live. All right. So, if you see me looking off to the side, I keep both of the platforms up, so I'm just trying to keep track of any questions that come in so I can get them addressed. I'll start off with the questions that were sent in ahead of time. Good morning, Maisha and Scott and Lorena. Yes, spring break has been a lot of fun with the kids. Haven't done a whole lot. They've been wanting to hibernate and kind of just decompress. So, it's been nice though. Let's see what questions we have. All right, so this one came in through the application's email. They're asking if we can look at how we add, pictures of fabric to applique to show what it's going to look like in the design. All right, so let's take a look at that. So first off, I'm going to create just a basic applique for those who haven't seen the tool. So here, if you hold down, so where I'm clicking is the fill tool right here. Good morning, Kathy. So if you hold that down, you'll see the fourth one over is the applique input method. Okay, so this basically you're going to draw a shape and, oops, I did not draw a shape. Let's try this again. Turn this mess off, hit delete, and click on that. I'm going to draw. Okay, so I draw an ugly shape, hit enter, and down, I don't have any hole, well, let's add a hole. So first you draw your shape, then you draw any holes you have. If you have more holes, you can keep drawing them. I don't, so I'm gonna hit enter, and there we go. Now we have a applique. So the question is, this is great and all, but how do I change this purple to be something more like a fabric that I'm going to use? All right, so you're going to select your applique, go into its properties, and then under background type, you'll see you can change it to a graphic. Now, if I come over here, this is one that I saved in here. There's a handful of different options, but I print a lot of fabrics for sublimation, so I buy a bunch of repeating type pattern things. So I just took that graphic and did a file save as in Photoshop and saved it to a 96 DPI. All right, so that was the only change I made to the file. Rather than having it at 300 DPI, I saved it at 96 DPI. And if you notice, all these file names here have 96 at the end, so that's kind of your key of what DPI you want to save it at. All right, so I'm going to set it to that one, hit apply, and you'll notice it saved it, or it puts that fabric roughly in there. Clearly when I print it, I'm not going to have those tiling marks, but it gives you a rough idea of what it's going to look like. Okay, so there you have the putting a fabric in. Now where do you save that? So you can navigate anywhere you want. If you want to see where those are specifically stored, you would go to wherever you have DesignShop saved, installed. Okay, so in my case, it's on my C drive, program x86, Melco. I install DesignShop a lot of different versions, so you're probably going to just say DesignShop V11. I do weird things, so ignore everything after V11. And then if you come into fabrics, this is where those files are. These files are. So if you scan in scan your fabrics, make sure you save it as a 96 DPI file, and then you can drop it in here and you can use it. Okay, you can also navigate to other places, right? So I have sound, and sound's coming across. Does anyone else have sound issues? I don't think so. I think Scott would have pointed out if there were sound issues. So sound should be coming through. because it's showing up. Weird. All right. So that was the first question. We have one. All right, Kathy, thank you, and Mike. So it sounds good. All right, what else do we have? A question was typed in on YouTube. Let's go look at that. I have a question. When my machine changes to a different color for stitching, I get a thread break. I'm stitching on knit fabric, Actifeed 5 or 6 with a fresh needle. Well, first, what machine? Because Actifeed of 5 or 6 may or may not be appropriate based on what machine you're running and what software you're running. I know the newer softwares need a higher amount, a higher Actifeed, usually 4 to 8 points higher of what you would use from older machines. So 5 or 6 might be low depending on what you're working on, but I don't know that for sure because it really depends on your machine. All right, Ty asks on YouTube, so Maisha, if you can give me a little more info, we can talk about that some more. Ty asks, how do I use an existing design that's been digitized already, such as an applique animal character, and how do I add a new design to it and knock out parts of the design? Okay, so that's a big question. It'd be easier for me to make an example for you. So adding designs is simple. So let's look at that part first. So, okay, that's not a very good applique. All right, so let's say I've got this thing and I want to add more designs to it. So I can do insert design. So where that was right here, insert file. So if I click on that icon right there, now I can go find some designs. So I'm just going to go to my C drive because I got a bunch of designs there, or you do too. So designs, and I'm going to add this one because it's right there. All right, so let's say I want to add that for some reason, and I want to add some text. All right, so I can add some text and maybe actually make it fit in there. Let's do that. All right, so let me undo that so I can describe what I'm doing. Click the lettering tool, typed my name, and then I just hit escape and clicked on it to move it. Now to scale it, you can shrink it, but one thing you'll notice is if I hold Alt down, it's scaling it from the center rather than just from one side. Without Alt on my keyboard, it's scaling just to one side. So no Alt, it drags one side. If I hold Alt, it scales both sides, so from the center out. All right, so I've got mine. Okay, so that's adding designs. Now, knock out parts of the design. So what I assume you're wanting for that is, let's say you've got 2 appliques or 2 things like this, and now you want to delete what's underneath here. Well, that's not as simple, right? So if it's in wireframe, it's pretty straightforward, right? So I can come over here, add some wireframe points, grab this guy, move it over here, and now I've deleted some of that. But if I put it into 3D, you'll notice I still have satin on top of satin, which, generically speaking, if I were doing this, I wouldn't want that. So I'd want to get rid of the extra satin stitches that are under there. So how do you deal with that? Well, if it's in wireframe, it's pretty straightforward. So I can come in here. This is an applique, so I'm going to go ahead and convert to wireframe. What did that do? That just broke it out of the applique form. So now I've got things I can modify. I've got a single line that I can come over here and split element at selected points. So I can delete those extra satin stitches. So how do I do that? I click on the wireframe point right here, and then I'm going to hold this button down, and right there is split element at selected point. I'm going to do the same thing down here, split element at selected point, and you'll see, what did that just do? That gave me this element here. So if I turn off my other applique, now I can select that guy and delete it. So I don't think I mind that zigzag because that's going to hold the original fabric down. So let's say I had, a green fabric and a purple fabric. So the zigzag's fine. I just don't like all the bulk of satin on top of satin. All right, so like I said, that was simple to do because this was a wireframe. Now, if you're talking about a bunch of expanded stitch types like DSTs, you buy an applique file. Those are different because they're typically not done as OFMs or native wireframes. So you're going to have to go in and modify it individually, which can be not so enjoyable, or I don't like doing it. But let's see if I find one. I might have to put this one on hold if I can't find a design fast for you, and so I can make an example. Let's see. It's an applique design. Yeah. All right, so this is an applique design, and you can see it's all expanded stitch types. Expanded, meaning there are no, what's it called? There's no wireframe associated with it. It's just stitch information. So if I want to go modify it, so if I want to add something else on top of it, yeah, let's do that. Okay, I can do that, but now I've got stuff underneath there that I might want to delete. Okay, so how do we do it? Well, first you got to go into what you want to delete, right? So I can come over here, turn off 3D, and I see where the overlap is. So I can come in and do expanded point editing and just do this kind of the brute force way. Select all these stitches, hit enter and delete. All right, that deleted them. It left me these big jump stitches in there, which I don't know about you, I don't like those. So you're gonna have to come in and add trims so that you can go through and what's it called? And delete, basically delete the extra stitches and separate them into two parts. So if you add a point by left clicking on there, split element at selected point, or hit trim, now you have multiple elements. So you basically do that until you figure out that it's all split up, and then you can delete those. So like I said, you can do it. Is it enjoyable? I don't find it enjoyable, but it's way easier to do it within an expanded or a native OFM wireframe format. So if you convert it to wireframe, then, split element and you're done. So it's really easy to do. Okay, so Ty, did that help at all? All right, so Maisha, you have a Bravo. So the Bravo running V11 or running AOS? Sorry, with all the questions. So 5 to 6. Let's talk about Actifeed. So while you're looking at that, because that was actually another question on here. So since it kind of flows into a question that was typed in, let's look at that. How can I determine a good Actifeed number for various items? Is there some type of guide we can go by? Yeah, there's a starting guide, and it's in your manual. So before I show my little chart, it varies by machine and by software. So the best thing you can do is go to your specific machine's manual for the OS and look at what it says for this table. If you just look up Actifeed, it's there. I cut this one out. This is from probably one of the older manuals. So there's a table like this in all the different softwares. So let's go look at it rather than. So if I go to Melco-Service, let me pull it up on the screen so you can see it. So if I go to Melco-Service, if I go to the Bravo X, and I always go to the advanced interface, from this manual, once it downloads, you can just either search by the Actifeed and you'll find a starting table for it, right? So let's see, Actifeed. Okay, so here it describes what the Actifeed actually is, what it's looking at, what matters, the difference between standard and auto, how they work, the limits, finding the right settings. Down here is where you'll see some suggestions. Okay, so these tables do vary by machine, so just keep that in mind, take a look at them and see what makes sense for you, and it's a good starting point. So then you've got to take different things into consideration. What type of thread are you using? rayon or polyester? What type of fabric are you using? Is it super thin? Is it a handkerchief with really lightweight stabilizer? Or are you sewing a sweatshirt with 2 layers of 3.1 ounce stabilizer? Is it thicker? So those sorts of things are going to play into effect with what your Actifeed number is going to be. The thicker your material, the higher your Actifeed number needs to be. The thinner the material, generally, you're going to lower your Actifeed somewhat. If you're dealing with more brittle threads, like, the rayon's not quite as strong as polyester, you're going to need to increase your Actifeed number so that it's feeding more thread and not pulling that thread as tight so it snaps. So, these are good starting points for you to consider. We did put a link out there for you to review. Someone is asking, is it okay to change the Actifeed mid-design? Absolutely. I always like to remind people, pay attention to the sewing conditions and what's happening, right? So if you're sewing something and it's looking too tight, I've had people who are really that intuitive with how it's sewing that they go, why is it sinking, pulling so tight into the fabric? I want it to be, loftier. I want it to be a little looser on top. Well, they increase your Actifeed. It's going to loosen up the thread some. Obviously you can go too much with that, right? You don't want to make it so loose that you're looping. That's not fun. Or you don't want it so tight that you're snapping the thread, those sorts of things. So, keep that in mind. But yeah, you can absolutely change it midway. And are you only changing on the COG? Or are you going into settings? The COG. I don't know what that means. I'll show you where I change it right here. Minimum preset. If I'm running into auto, on the OS, the cogwheel. I don't understand what the cogwheel means. So where the minimum preset is, you would change that. Oh, I bet you're talking about the simplified interface, the cogwheel. Let's see, Actifeed, where is it? Material thickness. I assume you're talking about this, so you can change it there too. Yeah, so you can increase your number on here. Oh, the presser foot wheel has nothing to do with your Actifeed, of changing your Actifeed setting. So the wheel on the left-hand side, that's your presser foot. Yes, you can change it. Please don't do that while your machine is sewing. Hit stop, reach back there, change it. Yes, you can change it mid-design. If it's too low, you can raise it up. If it's too high, you can lower it. But stop your machine. You don't want to sew a finger. I have scars to show you why you should not do things while the machine's running. Don't do it. It's not good. All right. So Actifeed, you would change either in your on the OS screen of what's running the machine. Okay. Did that help? Let me look through the questions, make sure I didn't skip something on that topic. And then I'll go back up to the other questions. Okay. Yeah, Jen, did that help any? Hopefully. We did that. We talked about that. All right. So someone asked on Facebook, how can I delete and prevent running stitches from crossing over the top of applique designs? Well, you've just got to run through the design ahead of time and change the order if necessary. So let me close this and reopen it. It's all about order of sewing, right? So if I reopen that design, so one that I haven't messed with, and let's say I'm going to add an applique square here. It's probably not a good example. All right. I'm trying to think of an example. Sorry. I've got some embroidery over here. Yeah. Let's add a stitch direction so it's actually embroidery. And then let's put some text. Text over here. I'm just going to put a letter. All right. So let's say I've got that. And for whatever reason, we have a running stitch going from one to the other. Okay, will that work out well? Well, on the screen, it's hard to tell if that's going to be covered by your fabric or not. But it's all about order. This is, the fabric gets laid down way up here somewhere. So where is it being laid down? Right there. So it's being laid down at stitch 8. So if I'm sewing a running stitch here, it's clearly going to be on top of my fabric. So if I really wanted to sew this where it's not going to be, where the fabric is not going to be sewn over, I would have to change the order by moving it, right? So what did I do there? I grabbed these 3 things and moved it above where the fabric goes down. Oh no, that's not good. Sorry about that. My husband's announcing on Alexa.
That's okay.
That lunch is going to be ready. Sorry about that. Okay. Now that I'm embarrassed, what was I doing? Okay, so I ran those up here, and now they're going to be, so before the fabric goes down, meaning it's going to be below it. All right, so making sure it's just in the right order for sewing is the only way to make sure of it. And how can you check that? Run through your design. Down here you have a replay. You can speed it up so it's not taking forever. You can even fast forward through parts. And you can see it sews all that before it comes over here, so we're good to go. It's going to be covered up by fabric. Whereas if it's sewed it later, after the fabric goes down, that's going to be no good. All right. So it's just, now if it's a design and you do want that afterwards, okay, well, I really don't want that line there, so I'm going to have to select it and delete it and just deal with extra trims. Okay. All right, let's see. I'm scanning through and seeing if I missed anything else. Okay, cool. I don't see any on Facebook nor YouTube, so I'm going to pop back over to my pre. All right, so I have an EMT16, and basically I've been running a design and I'm ready to go home or leave my machine, and I don't want to wait for it to finish. It's time to go. What do I do? Okay, so yeah, there's a bunch of options. I'll tell you what I personally do. Just what I do is I tend to stop what I'm doing, check the bobbin, make sure it's nice and full, make sure all my needles are threaded, and if my bobbin is low, I put a new bobbin in because I want it to finish by the time I get back to work the next day. Put the bobbin in and I restart it and go for it. And I leave. I just, leave the machine running and I leave. That's what I personally do, because generally when I show up in the morning, it's sitting there done waiting for me to take it off the machine and put on what the next project is. So yes, I tend to let it run and go for it. Yes, you can turn off the machine and turn it back on, or you can even hit stop, leave it on at night. If you turn off the machine, it's going to pick back up where you left off, right? So you would want to back up a few stitches if you turn off the machine, because when you turn it back on, it's going to end up wanting to do a trim, at which point now you've got a split in the thread, so you want to have a little bit of overlap, so you back up a few stitches and tell it to go. But like I said, I let it run all night, finish up what it's doing and go. Let's see. I'm trying out an applique. It's a large piece, so after the stop, can you remove the hoop? Yeah, of course. So I remember really early when I started applique or embroidery in general on a single needle machine. Whoever was teaching the classes for my little single needle machine was very adamant that once it's in the hoop and clicked into the machine, don't take it off. Okay, you can pull particularly with our machines and things like that. That's not true, right? They click in, it's locked in place. It is perfectly fine to pull it out, cut your fabrics, snap it back in. Now make sure it's snapped in. Don't do like I've done it times where it's not fully snapped in, so then you get registration issues and all kinds of things no one likes. So yes, you can take it off, pull it on a table, cut your thread, and click it back in and you'll be good to go. So yeah, I don't do any of that while it's in the machine unless it's small, and when you do an applique stop, it pulls out, but most of the time what I'm doing is really big as well, so it's way easier for me to handle it sitting on a table and doing my cutting or my placing of fabrics. Sometimes I'm putting things on the bottom because I love in the hoop projects, and that's all easier to pin when the hoop is outside flipped over and I can actually pin or tape things in place. So yeah, you can move the hoop and deal with it. Over here, click it back in. Do not unhoop the fabric. That should be a given. I have snow white thread. It looks gray when sewing on a black towel. That's just the lighting and the reflections of the black on the white. So that's just what it does. You can, if you want it to look clear, you can look at the white in a brighter light. The columns are thicker, you have more white thread further away from the black, so you'll see less kind of that reflective look that your eyes are confusing and making it look grayer than it is. But the thread is white. It's not turning gray by sewing. So it's really just a lighting and how it appears to your eye. So just it's tricks, but lighting tricks, right? So making columns wider, that would be one way, basically because you're pushing the black further away from the white. Yeah, that's what I would suggest. What else do we have? We talked about the Actifeed. Is there a knife tool? And is there a way to do stamps? All right, let's look at that. That one made me think this morning. So thank you for asking the question. I had to think about it. All right, so I've got this fill, and I want to add stamp designs to it. Let's say I want to stamp hearts randomly through here or something like that. So how do we do this? Well, I'm going to click on this guy, the select automatic custom input thing, and I'm going to go to, where are they? Here, we have shapes. All right, so you can create your own shapes and save them off. I'm just grabbing these because they're here. All right, so click your shape that you want to stamp. So select it. You can see it's selected because it's highlighted. I have the little black box with the handles here. And then if you hold this button down, normally it's this guy right here, which is insert hole. I don't want to insert a hole. I want to do this guy right here. Insert a fill island. Okay, and now I'm going to come down to this guy and click and drag my little stamp. So click and drag, and now I have a stamped heart. Again, select that. I want to add a fill island. Click and drag my hexagon, and I've got a hexagon. Oops. Let's say you want to draw your own shape. Okay, again, select the shape, click the fill island, and now I can just draw whatever goofy shape I feel like. Okay, so you can stamp them by drawing stuff, by adding different shapes. Let's say you want to cancel that. Let's say you want to modify the shape afterwards and move it around. So select your shape, click. I'm going to select my wireframe, my points, and of course I didn't click them all. Here. So now I can left click and drag and move that around. Fill island, you see here, there's a different fill. It's just a fill and a fill. So without having overlapping fills, it's basically what they're terming this little effect of having a main fill with a secondary fill in here. Okay, so this guy right here is a fill island. It's just an island of fill within an existing fill shape. Okay, I can modify these shapes by changing the wireframe points around just by clicking and moving them. Okay. If you don't have that fill island selected and you just click and drag these on here, notice it becomes a fill on top of a fill. All right, so it's not within this existing one, it's a second fill shape. All right, so we have a few questions on YouTube. I'm getting thread breaks at trims. Is that a bobbin or Actifeed setting? I would start with Actifeed personally. Make sure it's not too low. I find most people tend to have it a little too low. So I would try that first. And then I'd also double check your bobbin tension. So it's always good to have that set right. But I would start by upping the Actifeed a little bit personally. Another question on YouTube. Can you input a link or any info on which needles? And I gotta scroll, sorry. Why is my screen not cooperating with me? All right. Which needles are recommended for small lettering? I'm specifically referring to small lettering on caps or left chest polos. All right, caps are going to be different than left chest polos, but left chest polos, yes, we can get you a link. I know Scott recently did a video on digitizing small lettering. There's one from a few years ago as well. That's fantastic. So I would check those out. But needles, depends on what thread you're using. If you're using a 48 weight thread and you're not going super tiny, a 7511 needle should be fine. If you're going down to the finer threads, like a 60 weight thread or a 70 weight thread, something like that, I would go down to a 65.9 needle. So generally thinner thread, smaller needles are going to give you much crisper looking tiny lettering. It's going to look cleaner. I mean, it's kind of the analogous to drawing with a Sharpie versus drawing with a fine pencil. Think of the thicker needles, the holes are bigger, right? It's stabbing it in larger areas. So if you're coloring with a Sharpie, it's going to be really hard to get a really small A. Versus if you grab yourself a really sharpened pencil, it's going to be a lot easier to get an A. So that's kind of what you would think about. The smaller you're going, you're going to have to narrow your thread, so get a finer thread. That's going to be increasing the weight, right? So going from a 40 to a 60 or 60 to a 70. I think they even have 90 weight thread now, but I typically just end up going to a 60 weight thread. And then going down, taking the needle size from a Sharpie, an 80 or 75 needle down to a 65.9. Okay. All right. We did get you some links on needles and a link on small lettering for you to review. Okay. Let's see, what else do we have? Oh, is there a knife tool? I skipped that. Let's go back here. All right, so I'm going to draw, actually let's draw a heart because I feel like it. Although I guess I should draw a 4-leaf clover or something, but oh well, we get a heart today. All right, so first thing I'm going to do is, so the question was, is there a knife tool? Well, there is a break apart tool, which is kind of the same thing, right? So I'm going to come over here and I'm going to insert a curve splice. Curve splice is this crooked looking one in the middle. And I'm just going to make a broken heart. Okay, so I got that. I'm going to also, just so you can see the difference, a splice line, a straight one is just a straight line. Okay, so I've got multiple splices in this shape. All right, so to break it apart, I'm going to go object. Oops, did I already break it? No, there we go. Got to select the object first. Object, break object. And now I've got it into 3 separate pieces, so we cut it apart at those splices. All right, so I'm going to undo it so I can do it again. All right, so I have my complex fill here with my splice lines in there. Object, break object. Right click, operations, break object. Gets you the same spot. Okay, so object, break object, right click, operations, break object. And that will split it apart into, basically it cuts it apart where those splice lines were. Now you can also do that manually a different way, right? So if I have another splice line in here, and let's say I want to cut it here. Well, I can of course break object, or I can come select my points that I want to cut it across and do this guy right here, split the element at selected point. Okay, and that'll cut it apart as well. So you've got multiple ways to deal with this. If you've got a straight line split element at selected points, really easy. If you've got it's all easy. So if you've got a curved one, you would select the end points and then split element at selected point. Okay. Let's see. We did that. Okay, cool. All right, so we talked about the knife, how you would do stamps. That was my other stuff. Okay, so that was all the questions I had ahead of time. Any other questions? I don't see any on Facebook. Let me check YouTube. Did I miss any? Nope. Okay. All right, y'all. I'll sit here for a minute looking awkward in case there's any other questions that come in. But we do these on a weekly basis most of the time. Just, try to get your questions answered. Help you be a little more productive. See, whatever you want to talk about, generally I'm game for. Someone said I have someone's purchased object. It ended up being 130. Oh goodness. You purchased 130 color design. That must be fun. In those cases, when I this is food for thought. When you're doing really large amount of color changes within designs, I'll tell you, I tend to go and set up the design in DesignShop first and make the colors exactly correct. So using the exact thread numbers that I'm going to use on the machine. That way I can go use the auto color feature within the OS when I go to the machine, and I don't have to, scroll through picking 130 different colors. I can just tell it to auto match all my colors, and that will get me there. Then I just have to go add the applique stops where I want it. So, it's food for thought. Can you show where the patch templates are in the software? Sure. So, close this. Let's start fresh. New. Under custom designs. Okay, that is not up when you start. So where do you get that? This guy right here. Select automatic custom shape input. And then right here, there's custom designs. And here you have a bunch. So if you want just a circle, left click and drag it onto the screen. And then I usually center it and zoom in, and there you have one. There's also faux marrow right here. So these are, again, ones you can use for patches. It's just a different type of border, right? It's got like a faux marrow stitch, and they're set up as if you're doing it as a patch. Okay, so you have your faux marrow stitch in a few different shapes that you can play with. And again, it's just left click, drag it on the screen, and move it around where you want it. Okay. There was a question, can I rewatch this later? Yeah. So all of these are on the YouTube channel as well as on Melco's Facebook page. So Melco's YouTube and Melco's Facebook, you can always find them. They're generally just called DesignShop Talks. There's also a link on Melco's FAQ that if you look, just go to that. How do you do that? Let's do that. All right, so if I go to Melco service, click on the FAQ, type here DesignShop Talk. Oops. There they are. Okay, and these will get you links to the different videos as well. So you get it on Facebook or YouTube, and there's generally little topics about them here as well. And we did get you the link to the archive of live presentations. Okay. Any other questions before I call it a day? Okay. Well, I will be back next week. See what questions you might have. You can email them ahead of time to applications@melco.com. I tend to post in a few of the groups on Facebook, looking, trolling for questions, generally the day before I do the live. So you'll see this little splash screen, this guy saying, hey, what questions do you have? Type them in there and I'll grab them. Yeah. Oh, someone else just asked a question. Let's see. I set up Actifeed for puff, but after every object trim, it reverts and sucks puff down to almost 4, although the screen says it's set to high, say 35. Any ideas? I would check to make sure you don't accidentally have settings by color turned on, because every time I would check that after trim. That doesn't make any sense. If you can email the design you're working on with some details of what's happening to applications@melco.com and let us take a look at that, because it shouldn't be doing that. So if you've got any screenshots of what's going on or something like that, that might be useful, because I don't personally see that. So if you can email them, we can take a look at it and see if we can help you out directly. All right, I will be back next week. Thank you for joining me, and I hope these are helpful for y'all. I will talk to you next week. Have a great weekend.